What is going on, gunfighters? Today, I think a pretty fun episode about kind of the secondary, tertiary survival calibers. We often talk about go-to calibers for survival: the 12 gauge, the 22, the 9mm, the 308. But there are others. There are a plethora of calibers. What about those? What are some other good choices for survival? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to plug in the bio. It's been a while since I've put it in, so I will put it in for today. This may attract some new listeners that are interested in one of these particular cartridges. If you've heard it, just fast forward a couple of minutes, and we'll get into it. I'll roll into a quick abbreviated bio and then into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories are with firearms. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. By God's grace, He got me through that safely. After that, I served as an instructor, an urban warfare instructor and a desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I also served with the LAPD, both full-time as a sworn police officer and in some more specialized assignments, as well as serving in the U.S. Army, full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a FBI firearms instructor, still am an FBI firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years, also NRA certified and some other three-letter government agency certified. I've been a private contractor for a three-letter government agency I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. By God's grace, He got me through all that in one piece, not because I'm better, but because He chose to have grace and mercy on me. I've been a professional hunter and guide. Professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've done that, but I'm blessed to be able to say that I have. I've hunted everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast to gray squirrel on the East Coast to prairie dog on the West Coast and elk and bear and wolf and slain all manner of beast. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different disciplines. Enough about me, guys. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. Let's get into today's topic. Now, I got thinking about this episode earlier this week, or was it last week, doing some upland game hunting some quail and pheasant, and even saw quite a few turkey. And I was thinking about I was hunting with a 20 gauge, but I was thinking about the 410. I don't actually own a 410, but a 410 was my first shotgun. Bolt action 410. And the main reason I don't own one today is because I have many 12 gauges and I have a 20 gauge for upland game hunting because the shells are cheaper than 410. 410 ammo, sadly, is like one of the, except for like 28 gauge or something, is one of the most expensive shotgun gauges. It's expensive and it's smaller than 12 or 20 gauge. So what's the point? Well, the point is just that it's smaller and lighter. Why it's, I think, a really good choice for survival, and it's lesser talked about. One of the big things about the shotgun is the weight of ammo. If you do have to bug out on foot, shotgun ammo is heavy and it's bulky. Well, the 410 lessens both of those. The 410 is much less bulky and much less heavy than the other gauges. And I think we often think about the 410 as underpowered, but I would submit to you a lot of that is because you're comparing it to a 12 gauge, which is a powerhouse, which is a Clydesdale among defensive firearm calibers or gauges. Whereas a 410 might be thought of more as a Palomino. But hey, a Palomino can get the job done, and sometimes just as good or better. And it does it with less weight and less bulk. And also, in general, there are exceptions, but in general, the weight of the shotgun is going to be less. I think there's a reason many of the old school survival combo guns came in 410 for just that very reason. Now, I'm not going to lie, there is a big advantage if you're trying to take birds out of the air with bigger gauges and more pellets. And that is all. It's all fine and dandy. Like when I'm out quail hunting to try and shoot quail out of the air. That's going 30 to 40 miles an hour. That's about the size of a fist for its vitals. But in a survival scenario, I'm probably going to wait for the bird to land, right? Because I don't really care about the sporting aspect of it. I care about eating. And in that case, if the quail or pheasant or whatever is on the ground, it doesn't really matter if I shoot a quail or a dove or whatever with a 410 or a 12 gauge. And it's less bulky and weight of ammo. Also, going for defense. Again, I think a lot of people think of it as underpowered, but that's if you compare it to a 12 gauge. If you compare it to a lot of other calibers, like if you look at what some of the more modern defensive loads, like triple-aught buck is a real common one because it stacks well in a 410. Triple-aught buck, like 5 pellets of triple-aught buck. You look at that as a defensive round in close quarters defensive situations as opposed to like a 9mm out of a PCC, and it starts to look like a horse of a different color. You look at it and you go, oh, okay, that's a thing. And many a deer have been put down with a 410. I grew up hunting with a 410. I grew up running around all over the backwoods putting meat on the table with a 410. A 410 is very, very capable. And a lot of times, especially as Americans and American red-blooded American males, right, we think more, better, bigger, Tim the Toolman Taylor, more power. But more sometimes is less. Especially if you're talking about a survival scenario where it largely becomes a game of math and calories. Calorie input versus calorie output. And if you have to carry 100 rounds, let's say your loadout's 100 rounds of shotgun ammo. 100 rounds of 410 weighs a lot less than 100 rounds of 12 gauge. And again, if you can put that bird down, if you put that, let's say, spruce grouse down with either one, right, then more is not more. More power in the shotgun gauge in that case may actually be less. Now, I'm not saying the 410 is the rival of the 12 gauge as far as like tactical door kicking operations or things like that, but I'm saying for a survival situation, the 410 is a peach. And it's just as versatile. You get that same versatility as you do with other shotgun gauges, right? You can shoot number 8 shot, you can shoot number 6 shot, you can shoot triple-aught buck, you can shoot slugs. They have those more modern rounds designed for a lot of the handguns, which they're a niche weapon. I'm not going to recommend those for a carry gun or anything, but they did spawn quite a few defensive loads, which you could certainly use and would be, I think, more effective out of an actual shotgun because you get the longer barrel, the easier sighting. But those things like the rounds with the discs stacked on top of each other for defensive purposes. So, and that would even give you the option. I'm not saying it's a good idea because I almost certainly wouldn't go this way. But it would give you the option if you had that idea, which we'll get into later with the next cartridge we're going to talk about, with carrying a handgun and a long gun in the same caliber. And on that note, that's a nice segue. If you were going to do that, if your big thing was, I want to carry a handgun and a long gun of the same caliber, I think the one that has the most merit to it in this situation is the 357 Magnum. The 357 Magnum as a survival cartridge. The 357 Magnum is proven. It is perhaps has the best reputation for, lack of a better term, stopping power in common defensive handgun cartridges, period. Now, it's not used as much anymore because we've gone from revolvers to semi-auto. And although it is better ballistically round per round, there's something to be said for having a lot more than 6 rounds on tap, especially in today's era of modern shooters and multiple attackers and things like that. But as far as like one-shot effectiveness or round per round effectiveness, 357 Magnum from a handgun, it is legendary, literally legendary. It's like that 125 grain 357 Magnum load is a legendary load for stopping power. And because it has street cred, right? It's not because of Hollywood. It's not because it doesn't have that reputation because of like Dirty Harry, because of some movie, because almost no cop carries a 44 Magnum. But it got it from real world street cred. Quite a bit more effective than other common rounds at the time. It is a great round out of a handgun. Here's another big advantage. You get even more ballistic effectiveness out of a carbine if you go to a 16 or 18 inch or even longer barrel. It's not a true intermediate caliber because it's very different characteristics than like a 7.62 by 39, but it is certainly more than most other common handgun rounds. So if an intermediate cartridge is in between a full powered rifle cartridge like a 30-06 and a handgun round like a 9mm or a 380, and the intermediate is in the middle, the 357 Magnum out of a carbine is kind of, let's say, a quarter-mediate round. It's certainly in between. It gets a lot closer to like 30-30 and 7.62 by 39 than it does handgun. So I wouldn't call it a true intermediate cartridge out of a rifle because you don't get that modern Spitzer bullet design, and there are some detriments to that, but it is much more effective than a normal, like a 9mm handgun round, which is a de facto, which is a great handgun round. But this is when you put a 357 Magnum in a carbine, it's playing by some different rules ballistically. Also, a big advantage for the 357 Magnum we talked about, you can use it in both. They're really, really good, and they would be a good choice for a go-to Apocalypse sidearm. Would be a good stainless steel mid-size 357 Magnum revolver. You have the added advantage of pretty much the guns we're going to talk about, like a revolver, like a lever action. If they'll eat 357 Magnum, they will eat 38 Special. Some other more obscure calibers as well, but those are the main two. You may have some guns that are finicky and don't like feeding 38 Special and a 357 Magnum lever action, but for the most part they will. So you get that duality of being able to shoot different ammo. Also, not only is 357 Magnum effective with really good modern hollow points, it's really good and effective with old school cast lead semi-wad cutters. In fact, for hunting, they're still a top choice. So if you're making your own ammo, and you certainly can, you can reload it. In that case, the 38 Special, and by extension the development of the 357 Magnum, you can load it with black powder. You can make your own primers, you can make your own powder, you can cast your own lead bullets. And not only will it work, it will be quite effective. So there's a lot going for the 357 Magnum. For like, if you were picking one cartridge, that was going to be your one, right? Your like, I've hopefully gotten rid of a lot of my oddball calibers, and then now there's not a place for that, and if you want to collect them and have fun with them, that's great. If you were whittling down to like one caliber, right? The 357 Magnum, if you told me I could only have a caliber, it would certainly be up there if I had to settle on one caliber, period. It is fantastic for that. I also should mention with these revolver rounds, and right now we're talking about a 38 Special 357, they do make the birdshot. It does not make it anywhere near as effective as an actual shotgun, even a 410. It's not even in the same ballpark. But it can be effective at really close range. And they make different size shot, and you can also reload your own different size shot in the shot capsules. Again, it's not going to make it a shotgun. I would not advise you to go out and try and hunt quail with that. But they do exist, and it does give you a little bit more versatility at extremely close range. If you look at situations in the past where civilizations collapse, disease and vermin and rodents that spread disease can be a big, big deal. So if you're trying to take out a rat or something inside, which might very well be a thing, that kind of shot for that application at very close range, where you lessen your chance of ricochet and things like that, that gives a little bit more versatility to the 357 Magnum 38 Special. A really, really versatile cartridge. I think, and I should mention on the long gun, the obvious choice for this is probably lever action. That's going to be the most common, but probably my number one choice, it's kind of an oddball, but it's a really cool gun, Ruger. Ruger makes a bolt action. Yes, a bolt action 357 Magnum, the 77 357. 77 dash, or slash, it's a slash. Slash 357. Stainless steel, which I like. Ruger makes really good guns. The Model 77 is one of my favorites. Modern bolt action design. It's a lineage of one of my all-time favorites, a Pre-64 Winchester. but you get the idea. They make a bolt action version of it. Ruger's known for kind of overbuilding their guns. Something like a stainless, and I'm not married to Ruger, but something like a stainless steel Ruger GP100 and that stainless steel M77, that would be a pretty good loadout. And really compelling for a survival loadout. Now, less versatile but more powerful. But most of the things that I said about that will transfer over to the 44 Magnum. The 44 Magnum is more powerful, but I think it tips the scale as being a little bit too powerful. Right? It's not that it's not even more effective round per round in a handgun. I mean, but the issue is that most handguns chambered in 44 are too big to be practical carry guns. They're too big, they're too heavy, despite what Dirty Harry would have you believe, right? That's Hollywood. He's carrying that gun on him and pulling it out of a suit jacket for a shot. He's not working 12-hour shifts with a giant 44 Magnum with a bunch of 44 Magnum ammo strapped to him as a detective. Right? Again, you probably heard in the bio, I was a law enforcement officer. I saw exactly zero ever in my entire career anybody in law enforcement ever carry a 44 Magnum. I'm sure somebody did it somewhere at some point, but there were still guys with wheel guns, but they weren't rocking 44 Magnum. So I think it's less versatile because it's not as common as a carry gun, and you might get into a situation in even especially day to day where you can totally carry. There are many good carry options in 357 Magnum. Usually I carry a full-size combat handgun, semi-automatic. However, there are times when my carry gun is a 357 Magnum. That illustrates that there are a lot of really good carry options in 357 Magnum. There are not many in 44 Magnum. So for that reason, I'd say less versatile. And even in some kind of grid down scenario, you may want a concealed carry, right? The point of survival is surviving. And if the firearm on my person, if it being concealed and being inconspicuous increases my chances of survival, then I might want to do that. And it's easier to conceal a medium frame revolver than a large frame revolver. Anyway, the 44 Magnum will do much of the same things. You get the 44 Special option, although 44 Special is nowhere near as common as 38 Special, so it's a little bit less versatile there too, but it is more powerful. There is no doubt. Right, if I am hunting deer or I'm in elk country, I was just hunting elk last week, if I had to pick for medium to large game hunting, and not that a 357 Magnum wouldn't do it, but if I was picking between the two, which one's more effective, for sure, the 44 Magnum out of a carbine is more effective. It gives you more power. It's a more powerful round. But going back to like the calorie math, it's also heavier, right? A box of 44 Magnum is quite a bit heavier than a box of 357 Magnum. So you got to kind of weigh that as well. 44 Magnum is a great caliber. It's a great all-around choice. Now, if we're talking about loadouts, they do make some lightweight. They make the 329 PD, which is a scandium frame. I don't know that I'd want to shoot that a lot in 44 Magnum, but in 44 Special it probably wouldn't be bad, but it's very lightweight because it's scandium. And there are many good lever actions, and that same Ruger, they make it the 77/44 stainless steel 44 Magnum bolt action. And they've made especially Ruger, but other companies too, like Marlin, have made some really good lever action and carbine 44 Magnums over the years. So if you like that idea we are talking about, but you want more power than the 357, there you go. And I will briefly mention the 45 Colt or the 45 Long Colt. I'm not going to get into a big discussion about which name on that is right, but you know what I'm talking about. The 45 Long Colt, it is a very versatile cartridge as well. Some people might say more versatile than the 44 Magnum because if you load it, like the actual classic loading is not impressive. But with modern guns, again going back to Ruger, and this I'm not a show for Ruger, I'm not sponsored by Ruger, they tend to overbuild their guns. So a lot of the Ruger guns, like a Ruger Blackhawk, a lot of load manuals will even have extra load data for Rugers because you can load them so hot. And you can load a 45 Long Colt up to and sometimes exceeding 44 Magnum capability with good brass and the right gun. And while 44 caliber bullets are not obscure, 45 caliber I think is more common, .452. It's a real common caliber. So there is some advantage there. So that is also an option. Now let's go almost to not the opposite end, but a very far away caliber choice from these, from 45 Long Colt or 44 Magnum. And that's going to be the 22 Hornet. Now, obviously, when you talk about go-to survival calibers, people will think about the 223 because it is until if and when it becomes replaced by the 277 Fury, it is and has been for decades the go-to infantry caliber of our time, right? I carried one in the Marine Corps, also served in the Army, right? It's the M4 caliber, it's the M16 caliber. I also used other calibers as well, but it's like the de facto infantry cartridge for the Western world. For the rest of the world, for a lot of the world, it's the 7.62x39, but for us, it's the 223. So why would I even discuss? Why are we even talking about the 22 Hornet? Well, again, going back to that calorie ratio thing, it's lighter, it's smaller. If you're going to reload for it, it uses less resources. It uses less powder. But it's quite a big step up. If you're into the world of survival and guns, you're probably into 22 long rifle. And this is lesser talked about. I'm not saying you should choose this over a 22 long rifle, but it does have some attributes. It's not just a marginal step up, right? It is. People think of the 22 Hornet as underpowered because they compare it to the 223 or something even bigger like a 22 250. But if you compare it to a 22 long rifle or even a 22 Magnum, it is much more powerful than that. It's substantially more powerful than that. If you look at it as like a percentage, and you look at, people argue about like the 40 Smith & Wesson versus a 10 millimeter. Like if you look at the power difference as far as the ratio between 22 long rifle, 22 Magnum, and 22 Hornet, it's an appreciable gain. And here's the big thing as far as the 22 long rifle or the 22 Magnum. If you reload, this is an option if you reload. You can still, it's still an option if you don't, but it really shines when you reload because 22 Hornet is reloadable. Now you can reload. I am aware that you can reload 22 long rifle. In fact, I just met a nice gentleman, an old timer, and I got to learn a lot from him. And he actually talked me through how to reuse, reprime, and everything, and reuse and reload 22 long rifle. And if you could do that, you could certainly do it with 22 Magnum. But it's not as easy as reloading for a centerfire cartridge. So if you reload the 22 Hornet, it makes a lot of sense. Talk about the weight of ammo. That's one of the big things that people say about the 22 long rifle. You can carry so much ammo. Well, 22 Hornet doesn't weigh a lot more, and you can reload for it, and you could have your go-to loadout of ammo already preloaded, and you could carry easily a pound of powder. Something like H110, or I'm not going to give out load data or other powders. It doesn't take a lot of powder. That's it, especially compared to like a 223. It's an efficient cartridge. You can reload. I'm not going to do the math, but you could, for 1 pound of powder, reload a lot of 22 Hornet, and you wouldn't have to carry the exact number of cases because you have the 22 Hornet, or especially the K Hornet, which I'm not going to get into the differences on that. If you're that interested, you can look into the Hornet and the K Hornet. But right, your initial loadout of cases, you can reload those, and they'll probably outlast you in this scenario. Probably last a lifetime, because unless you load them red hot, it's not like you're gonna run out of cases. You just reuse them, and that's a lot easier to do. And they even make, I was talking about, it's easier to do with a centerfire cartridge. They even make hand reloading tools, so you could in your pack have the ability to reload, which is pretty cool. I'm not saying it would be my go-to choice, but I'm saying it is intriguing if you were looking for. Anyway, there's a lot of merit to the 22 Hornet, and oddly enough, there have been several handguns made in 22 Hornet. I just heard recently that Ruger, I don't know, it just comes up in this episode, but Ruger's making one of their revolvers in 22 Hornet. So there are and have been handguns made in 22 Hornet. There have been some really good options offered in 22 Hornet over the years. It's not as popular nowadays, and the big part of that is because a lot of people don't reload. And if you're going to buy ammo, just because of economy of scale, it's a lot more available and usually affordable to get 223 than it is 22 Hornet. But 22 Hornet definitely, I think, has some teeth as a survival caliber. And that more power comes into play. Can you take deer with a 22 long rifle? Yeah, you can. But you are very limited. Here's what I want to say to you. Have you done that? Have you actually done that? Because the whole point of shooting the deer is not to hit it. The point of shooting the deer in a survival scenario is to recover it and eat it. And I would say that's more of an expert sting if you're really good at tracking and stalking or really good at headshots. But before you tell me how you're going to do that, have you actually done it? Sometimes even if you make a really good shot with a 22 rimfire, it can fail to penetrate a skull. Even if you think everything's going to go right, sometimes weird things happen in ballistics. And if you're on that marginal side, not that 22 can't be deadly. Trust me, I know 22 can be deadly on humans, on deer. However, there are a lot more shot opportunities that open up with a little bit more power, like a 22 Magnum or a 22 Hornet. There are shots that I would take with a 22 Hornet that I would not take with a 22 long rifle. Also, you talk about reloading. You could also load it down. You could load it down if you want a less powerful round, if you want to shoot small game and not destroy it. Pretty easy to load down with the 22 Hornet. You could have different projectiles so you could tell the difference. You could have just color the back of your case with a Sharpie so you know your high-powered round for your low-powered round. But anyway, it's a flexible, versatile cartridge, I think, that is not talked about very much. Now let's jump up to, again, a completely different direction. What about the 45-70? The old workhorse. This one is a Clydesdale, the old Clydesdale that just keeps soldiering on. Refuses to be put out to the glue factory. The 45-70. It's a powerhouse, right? It can be. The original loadings, much like the 45 Long Colt, the original loadings are nothing to write home about. A lot of people think of it as like the Buffalo cartridge, but it's not. If you look at when buffalo hunting was banned, like market buffalo hunting was banned in the U.S. in the year that the 45-70 came out, you'll easily see that that was not a cartridge that took buffalo. I mean, I'm sure it took a buffalo or two somewhere along the way, but most of the buffalo were dead and gone by the time the 45-70 came out, and that's just a reality. But so I think that's kind of myth and lure if you look into the actual history of that, but it's a powerful cartridge, and it certainly will take anything in North America, right? It will, with modern loadings, right? The old load, I'm not telling you to run into the apocalypse with a trapdoor. With a modern gun, a modern strong action, and a modern load, 45-70 is a beast. And you can still load it down if you want. Going back to the cast lead bullet thing, you see with a more modern bullet, you get to a certain velocity where you can't cast lead bullets and have them shoot effectively for very long out of a rifle because it starts stripping the lead off. The velocity exceeds the capability of that bullet. That's why one of the reasons we went to jacketed bullets. And that threshold on velocity means that you can't really make your own bullets easily with more modern calibers. You're probably not casting bullets for 308. But you can cast your own bullets. You could have a bullet mold. If you're decent at scavenging, there's lead all over the place. A lot of old buried wires and stuff in the ground have a kind of a lead pipe conduit. Well, a lot of old plumbing actually is lead. The word plumbing comes from lead. The word lead. Obviously, car batteries have quite a bit of lead in them. Wheel weights, lead. There are many sources of lead. So if you were decent at scavenging, you could keep coming up with lead. And a cast lead 45-70 is a beast. It's still very capable. It's not a super high velocity round. Even in modern loadings, it's not getting up to velocities of like a 308 or a 30-06 or anything like that. So you get the ability to cast your own bullets, which is pretty cool. Also, it's an original black powder cartridge, which means that you're not going to get the velocities that you're getting out of modern powders and efficiency and things like that, but you can reload it with black powder, and you can make your own black powder. It's 3 simple ingredients, And you get to use your own urine, which, what's not fun about that? I guess you could use somebody else's urine, but that's just gross. But making your own black powder, right, it's not that hard. And you can make your own primers. Like, so you could have, if you're the engineering type, if you're up to the challenge and opportunity permits, right, you're probably not making ammo on the spot, but if every once in a while you can stop when it's winter time, when you've taken an elk or two and you've got time to kick back by the fire and smelt some lead, and you're in one place long enough to make a batch of black powder because you're like not making it in 5 minutes, right? At least I can't make it in 5 minutes. But you get the idea. You could have a long source of ammo. You could be your own resupply. You could be a one-man ammo factory, and you'd still have a very capable cartridge that would take anything in North America. And because it is the old Clydesdale that just won't be sent to the glue factory, there's still quite a few modern rifles being made in it. When Marlin went under and got bought by Remington and that whole debacle, and then it got bought by Ruger, I think the first gun Marlin came back out with was a 45-70. Of all the guns that they've made and are famous for, came back out with the 45-70, wisely reading the market. Right, there are a lot of good modern options in 45-70, so there's some real merit there. Like, I probably wouldn't be recommending this if you could only get it in a trapdoor or a Shiloh Sharps, but there's some really good options like that Marlin Trapper. Right, there are worse things you could have. Again, I'm not saying these would be my first choice. I'm talking about kind of wild cards and oddballs here in this episode, but it has quite a bit of merit. Alright, we just went super old school. Let's end with super new school. One of the big advantages we talked about, 22 long rifle, the reason it's often mentioned, and to a lesser degree 22 Magnum, is it's lightweight, right? It has the ability to carry a lot of ammo. Well, a much more modern option would be the 5.7. 5.7 was kind of teetering on the edge of obscurity for a while because there was really only the 5.7 handgun and the P90 or PS90 carbine rifle, bullpup, whatever. But a lot of guns have come out in recent years in 5.7. And 5.7 has a phenomenal power to weight ratio. You're carrying a lot more. You could carry a lot more 5.7 than you can 45-70, right? Just to give you an example, or even 357 Magnum, which is not overly heavy, but and it's not only light, but it's small. Not as small and light as 22 long rifle, but it gets pretty close, and you're dealing with it. You're dealing with a whole different ballpark. A lot more reliability, right? Because it's a center fire round. It's got modern center fire primers. It's more reliable. It's a bottlenecked cartridge. It's likely going to feed better. It's got a lot more power. Now, you can technically reload it. It's a center fire round, but it's got some weird issues where it's not tapered, and a lot of the modern ammo is coated with some kind of specialty coating, which I don't know if you're going to easily be able to replicate, and I don't know if it'll feed well in some of those guns. So not as friendly to reload, but if you're just not a reloader and you just want, especially for like an urban environment, you think you might have to survive in an urban environment and you're going to have to leave whatever location you're at and survive with the ammo you can take, right? 5.7 is an intriguing choice. It's got a super high power to weight ratio. It's lightweight, right? One of the things talked about with the 22 long rifle, I've said, and this is not my plan for the apocalypse, but you could run out with no shirt on, no shoes, with a pair of old BDU woodland camo pants, your 22 long rifle gun of choice, and 1,000 rounds of ammo in your cargo pockets, right? A brick in each cargo pocket. You wouldn't even need a bag. And that's that. If you were judicious about your marksmanship, that ammo supply would last you the rest of your life. That's the big draw of the 22. Well, the 5.7 gets real close to that. I don't know if you could fit 1,000 rounds in cargo pockets, but you could certainly carry 1,000 rounds. So if we're talking about that, and it's got better power to weight ratio, right? It's a lot more powerful than 22 long rifle. Now, it's not as affordable. If you're on a budget, 22 long rifle is still a clear winner, but if you've got the money, and it's more about you live in an urban environment and space is your restriction, and you think you might have to leave and carry the ammo with you, but you want something a little bit more reliable and more powerful than 22 long rifle, but you still want all the merits of being able to carry a lifetime supply of ammo in your pack. 5.7, again, that's intriguing, and there are some really good handguns and decent rifle options in 5.7. So it is an intriguing option, especially for like the modern urban, suburban, fringe, hinterland kind of areas. So there are some intriguing options, and maybe you settle on one of these for a go-to survival loadout rather than the standard options that we all talk about, like 308 or 12 gauge or things like that. So it's just some interesting options to consider, some real merit. What do you guys think? Let me hear from you. If you listen on Spotify, there's a thing where you can communicate with me on there. You can also contact me at goodshepherdtraining.com. If you like the show and you're not following or subscribed, I hope you'll go down and like and subscribe, follow the show, whatever vernacular your app uses, hit some stars, leave a rating, all the things, right? I would appreciate it. And if you want to step up and be, instead of just a passive listener, just an absorber of the information, you want to be an active member of the tribe, you want to interact more regularly and get more specialized content. We just had a discussion on there, just a fun discussion on Patreon about what was your first gun, the first gun that you got, and then what was the first gun you bought with your own money, if they were different, and then what was your first handgun, because a lot of people, they start out with a long gun. It's a fun discussion for us to have as patrons. It's kind of a virtual tribe and if I dare say family on there. That's just one example. Patrons get a lot of cool specialty insider only content, a lot of patron only episodes that will never see the light of day here in the general population, if I use prison terms, in the gen pop of the listeners, right? They get a lot of specialty content that you're just not going to get, and I'm more real a lot of times and more honest with them than I am on air for obvious reasons, right? So if you want access to that, consider becoming a patron. And also, if you just want to support the show, if you thought this show was worth $1, right? $1, the fraction of a cost of any of these boxes of ammo, consider becoming a patron. So anyway, become a patron. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, let's start wrapping up. Tactical tip of the day, tactical verse of the day. Tactical tip of the day: wax. May not be something you think of as a survival item, but wax. Wax is good for so many things, whether you're talking about paraffin wax or beeswax or some other petroleum-based wax. Wax is good for a number of things. We often think of a gun oil and you got to have your CLP, or no, it's all about the brand X. I'm a fan of this brand of gun lubricant, which is all well and good, but wax will do things that oil just doesn't do as well. If you're coating the outside of a gun for really harsh environments, wax. I use wax a lot of times on my guns, on wood finishes, on blued steel, on stainless steel. If you're talking about really nasty, austere environments, that wax is probably going to stay on a lot longer and better than oil. Also, it's good for many things. You can use it to treat leather on shoes to keep them going longer, keep them waterproof. Mentioned wood. You can use it to make candles. In fact, that's historically a big thing. And if electric lights are no longer a thing, we're talking about a survival caliber episode, right? And you need to make light. It's an easy thing to store and transport. It lasts a long time. I'm not aware that it has a shelf life unless it like melts and gets nasty and just goes out of its container. But if you put it in a container, right, you can make a candle. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. Wax has a lot of uses. Talking about containers, to seal up and make a container watertight. If trying to take a container and make sure it's watertight for a cache, like taking a mason jar and coating the lid and everything with the wax so that it doesn't corrode and rust, or it takes much, much longer. Just, there are a lot of good uses for wax. I'm looking at a tin of it right now. Use wax quite a bit. You could coat a knife blade with it so that it doesn't rust, get nasty, especially in nasty, austere environments. It's probably going to stay on there longer and better than oil. I'm not saying you can't oil knives. I oil knives too, but you get the idea. Good for many things. So If you've got 20 different gun lubes and you don't have any wax, maybe consider having some go-to wax. Make sure it doesn't have any additives that are going to corrode the finish of your gun and stuff, but they make waxes just for guns, and I'm not saying you have to do that. You could just go with some paraffin or some other kind of wax that doesn't have anything added to it. But anyway, wax. Your tactical verse of the day. From John 14. And whatever you ask in my name, that I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. If you love me, keep my commandments. We desire many things in life, but our number one desire should be to love God, to fall more in love with God, to love God better and to serve God better, which are one and the same thing. If you love me, keep my commandments. One of the ways we show our love is with our obedience, with our trust. It is written the law was given for our good. We listen to God because He knows what's best for us and we trust Him. We don't do it perfectly, but that should be a number one desire, to love God more, to serve God more, to obey God. With that, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.